Good morning. I'd like to call this meeting to order. And I would entertain a motion to reconvene an open session. Moved by Councillor Kiefer, seconded by Karen Schnarr. Please indicate your support by raising your hand. That is carried. So I'm just pausing. Is Tony in the room or is he still coming? Tony's computer is just gearing up. I'd like to acknowledge that the land on which we gather today is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabe, and the Neutral people. We acknowledge the enduring presence of these Indigenous people with whom we share this land today, their achievements, and their contributions to our community. We offer this acknowledgement as an act of reconciliation between Indigenous and non-Indigenous peoples of Canada. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest to declare? Seeing none, I would move to the consent agenda items and ask, is there any item that anyone would like removed to the regular part of the agenda? Karen.
Thank you, Chair Redmond. Not so much moved, but I just wanted to commend the individuals involved with consent item number, hold on, let me scroll down, 7.2, which is the first quarter frontline call reduction strategy. And, you know, we've certainly spoken about this in past meetings, but the work to divert calls to more appropriate or, you know, different levels of the service. And this is just an example, I thought, in kind of, you know, hidden in consent about that work that is clearly being done in order to reduce it. And I think it was close to, off the top of my, like, I think it was like 7,000, like it was very impressive. And I just wanted to note that as part of this meeting.
Thank you so much for highlighting it. I would agree with you. And I did want to make note about the delegation of authority report. We are keeping with the delegation authority policy in place for one more month. As it's noted in the report, it's 7.9. The final provincial orders are expected to expire on April 27th, 2022, and we anticipate bringing a recommendation to the board at our May board meeting to repeal the delegated of authority at that time. Again, I would underscore that while it's been in place for the vast majority of the pandemic, it has never been used. But having highlighted that one item about call reduction and highlighting the delegation of authority, I see no other indication that people would like to discuss any of those items. So I would accept a motion to move and second the consent agenda. That's moved by Rosita, seconded by Karen. Please indicate your support by raising your hand. That is carried. Thank you, colleagues. Any business arising from the minutes? Correspondence? Police services report? So we're at 11.1. It's police reported hate crime in Canada. And Chief, did you want to introduce this? And Margot?
Thanks so much, Chair Redmond and members of the board. Good morning and happy April. And what a tremendous privilege it is to be with you. And thank you, Vice Chair Schnarr, for your comments and recognizing the work of our frontline support unit led and by Superintendent Tom Bursey, along with Inspector Jamie Sheridan and the team that is actually looking to continue to divert calls for service. Very much appreciate that, and we're hoping that we continue to grow that. We did see some challenges throughout the pandemic that impacted some of those operational pieces, but we appreciate the comments. We're rolling into a series of Chief of Police reports. I know we have an aggressive agenda, but I do want to, one of the key things that we do bring to the board is Stats Canada reports. Note that this one is already 2 years. We're talking about 2020. And I know that thanks to Marg's leadership, as well as Ms. Kate Richardson, who sit on a national Canadian Chiefs Committee, titled Polis. We are working at advancing ongoing data in a more real-time perspective. There's an evolution occurring, but this one's an important one, particularly over the last 2 years throughout the pandemic. Locally, we've seen the continued challenges of hate within our society. We've seen the continued challenges around intolerance, and we've been having courageous conversations around systemic racism, systemic discrimination, systemic barriers within not only our society, but also within policing. And so it's very important. We also have Superintendent Eugene Fenton, who's with us, that provides an operational lens and oversees and leads our hate crime team. And of course, we'd be remiss, as the board is aware, yesterday, we once again received $1.5 million over the next 3 years from the Solicitor General, Minister Jones, supporting our hate crime team and our investigative perspectives. But there's also a lot of great collaborative and ongoing work happening. So welcome, Margaret. I'll turn it over to you for highlights of the report, and we'd be pleased to take any questions from the board. Good morning, Mark.
Good morning, Chief. Thank you. Good morning, Chair Redmond and members of the board. You're likely used to seeing Denise Lowe, one of our strategic planners, present on this report in the past. Denise has been transitioning some of her responsibilities to our new data analyst, Dr. Amanda Williams, who we're thrilled to welcome to our service in March. Mandy, as we were coming to know her, to distinguish between the other Amanda in our branch, was previously lecturing in the UK on implicit prejudice and quantitative research methodologies. So Mandy's areas of focus and expertise is on insights from quantitative research to address issues of equity, diversity, and inclusion. And she brings experience in both the academic and the applied settings. So as I said, we're thrilled to have her part of our team. Unfortunately, Mandy was not able to be here today, but I do hope that you'll have the opportunity to meet her and hear from her at future board meetings. Mandy was instrumental in putting together this brief report. And as the chief mentioned, I'll just walk you through a few highlights today. So as you know, this is an annual publication of Stats Canada. It is a bit dated at this point, but it offers a little bit more in-depth analysis of the police reported crimes in 2020 that were motivated by hate. We right now are in the process of verifying the 2021 police reported crime. They're usually released at the end of July, early August for the previous year. As usual with all of Stats Canada's information, the full report and the data tables are available on their public website. And we've also included the infographic that is becoming a standard with some of their information as well. That's in your package. So again, nationally, some of the trends nationally that we're seeing in 2020, there were a total of 2,669 police reported crimes that were motivated by hate in 2020. So although nationally this year we did see an overall decrease in reported crime, this was a 37% increase in hate motivation compared to the previous year. That's shown as figure 1 in your package on page 52. So this Jurastat from Stats Canada looks at a few other details related to the hate motivation. So the type of violation that it was attached to. So we are seeing that the majority of the hate motivated crimes are non-violent in nature. So things like mischief or property damage. It also looks at the type of motivation. Across Canada in 2020, we're seeing that the majority of hate motivated crimes were motivated by hatred of race or ethnicity. Targeted populations in race and ethnicity, we're seeing a greater number of incidents that were targeted at the Black population. And in terms of religion, we're seeing a greater number of incidents targeting the Jewish religion. And that's across Canada in 2020. When we look locally, Stats Canada looks at census metropolitan areas. So we're the Kitchener, Cambridge, Waterloo census metropolitan area. There's 35 of those designated areas across Canada. In 2020, we can see that our CMA had the greatest percentage increase in hate motivated crime compared to the previous year. So we went from the 25th out of 35 CMAs in 2019 up to the 10th as far as the highest in rating. So we recorded a rate of 8.9 incidents per 100,000 people in 2020, and that's figure 4 in your package. So this change in our local areas based on a count of 54 incidents of police reported crime that were motivated by hate. And that's compared to 15 the previous year. So although 1 is too many, the numbers are relatively small and comparable to previous years. So you can see in figure 5 that there is a fluctuation over the years. So we go from lows of around 15 to 19 in previous years to highs of about 51, 53, 54. So the percentage change is quite, it seems high, but we went from one of the lower years to one of the higher years. So that percentage change does come out quite high. In terms of context in the local area, we're seeing very similar patterns as can be seen at the national level, that the majority of these crimes motivated by hate were nonviolent in nature. The majority were motivated by race and ethnicity. Again, unfortunately, with the Black population being more frequently targeted. And then hate crime motivated by religion, we're also seeing an increase in incidents targeting the Jewish population. Overall, the local increase in police reported hate crimes may reflect a number of different variables. As we know, it's never just one thing that's impacting these numbers. There was likely an increase in hate motivated crimes in and of itself. We're also expecting that there was increasing expertise within members of our service, both on the frontline patrol as well as the investigators in Superintendent Fenton's area, in identifying hate crimes and tracking them more thoroughly, as well as an increase in the public's confidence in reporting those crimes. So we do know that our EDI unit was very instrumental in raising awareness and encouraging more reporting. Also worth noting too, in our EDI unit, they've begun tracking and following up on hate-motivated incidents. So this is a slight distinction between incidents and crime. But in cases where the incident doesn't necessarily meet the threshold of a criminal violation, but it may be equally disturbing and victimizing. So they are now in the early stages of tracking and following up on hate incidents. And we hope also to report to those numbers to you in the near future. So I'll just wrap it up there, and certainly happy to answer any questions if there are any. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Margaret. Do we have any questions? And again, I would just make the observation that it has been my experience that governments measure what they value and change what they measure. So as much as this is a small sample and the numbers aren't huge, trends will emerge over time. So Margaret, thank you very much for that. I find this very, very informative. So I see no questions. So thank you very much for all this good work and from your team, Margaret. And we will go on to modernization project update. And Chief, are you going to introduce this one?
Thanks so much, Chair Redmond. And we have a number of individuals joining us today to discuss the modernization project. We have Superintendent Morris. We have Mr. Bob Hillhorst, our IT Director, Ms. Kirsten Hand, our Chief Financial Officer. The board will note that there is a recommendation attached to this modernization project update. And it's really 3 key components. And I just want to highlight the components before I turn it over to Deputy Crowell to introduce the presentation. One is we're looking for the board to approve an extension of the current body-worn car and in-car video until October 2022. And that the board would approve an expansion, and Superintendent Morris will take you through the proposed expansion. And then lastly is the economic and financial impact of those recommendations, which would be the expenditure of $324,000, $963.19, including all applicable taxes. And that will also be highlighted in the report. So again, want to reference that there is a motion and a recommendation, but I'll turn over to Deputy Crowell to highlight and welcome the team. So good morning, Mark.
Thank you, Chief, Chair Redmond, members of the board. Very pleased to revisit this item with you, the modernization project, as Superintendent Morris will explain, is our deployment of smartphone technology, our commitment to the digital evidence management project, and also our piloting of the body-worn and in-car video technology. We joined the provincial partners last week for an update, and we're happy to report that we're taking a cautious, responsible, and prudent approach in assessing all of this combined technology. As Superintendent Morris will walk you through, these are intertwined technologies, and the Chief has highlighted there are 3 recommendation portions to this report. So in the fairness of time, I'll turn it over to Superintendent Morris, who's going to walk you through the presentation, and our team will be happy to field any questions or concerns that arise from her presentation. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Deputy Kroll, Chair Redmond, members of the board, Chief Larkin. Thank you so much for this opportunity to update you on our modernization project. May I ask permission to share my screen with you at this time? Okay, I will.
It looks like it's coming.
Slowly. I might just stop sharing for one moment. I think my entire thing has frozen.
Would you like Jill to share her screen?
I might need to. I'm sorry, my Zoom is freezing. I'm trying to stop the share and it is not working. Can I ask what you're seeing right now?
We're seeing that you tried to share your screen. Now we're seeing the matrix, and Jill will share your deck with us.
Oh, there we go. Okay. I think that I'm able to share now, Jill. I don't know if that would be easier.
Jill's got it up. If you want to continue and just tell her when to advance.
Sure. Great. Okay. So like I said, thank you so much, Jill. You can forward it to the next slide. As the deputy alluded to, we have 4 areas that we will update you on today and bring forward a recommendation. Next slide, please, Jill. So first, I'll speak about our mobile phone strategy and to let you know that we have deployed over 860 devices into the hands of our investigators and our frontline officers. We've completed phase 1, and that includes all the applications you see here. Thankfully, we've received great feedback from our members about what a valuable tool the phones have been for them. Next slide, please, Jill. I have 2 examples here for you that speak to that. The first one is a sudden death investigation where patrol officers responded to a person found in the snow, and they were able to use their phone to take a photograph of the scene quickly before it was contaminated by EMS and fire personnel. That allowed them to piece together the evidence and understand the circumstances that led to the incident and find closure for the family immediately. It was a really great opportunity for them to use the phone. And the second one, we had a break and enter investigation at a residential area, and the officer was able to use their phone to access the digital evidence management system and allow neighbors to submit videos to provide suspect descriptions. And that allowed the officer to get the description out immediately without even leaving the scene. And previously, that would be something that would have taken us days or weeks to put together. So it's really helping and giving us a way to improve our responsiveness within the community. Next slide, please, Jill. So looking to the future for our phones, we will be putting together a committee, and that committee will be evaluating and identifying future apps that officers may need and want to use on patrol. You'll see the list of them here. And next slide, Jill. The other piece is we're about and very, very close to launching our Capture app. And that will allow frontline officers to record video and audio statements of witnesses and victims in situations. And where that's important is if we have a victim in a hospital bed, unable to come to the station, or witnesses or someone in a situation where it really prevents them or it's a huge hindrance for them to have to come into the station, we are going to be able to start looking at doing some of this work in the field. And also it will allow the officers to photograph and video some evidence in certain situations as well. Next slide, please, Jill. So for an update for our DEMS, just provincially, to give you a brief overview again, Just a reminder that our DEMS is our cloud-based digital evidence management system. It's offered by Axon. It was procured by the ministry for all justice sector partners across the province. It allows us to share and store and disclose evidence electronically back and forth. And you'll recall that our police service collaborated with the ministry in finding best practices prior to a full provincial rollout. So us and 3 other services were really integral in moving this forward. Next slide, please. As a result, we are now in a position to help other services. So we are meeting with Simcoe and Treaty 3 provincially, to name a few. Nationally, we're meeting with Winnipeg. The province has now expanded DEMS out to 25 services outside of the original early adopters. And you'll see that more law enforcement partners are now coming on board using the same system, and that just makes it easier for us to share back and forth. Next slide, please. So our current status for DEMS, we're almost finished completing our training for all of our members who require it. We'll be having that done by this spring. I'm very proud to announce that our IT branch here has actually developed an in-house solution to have our records in niche system speak with our DEMS system and integrate the 2 of them. And that itself has attracted some nationwide interest from other services across the country on how that was done. We've also initiated our Axon Citizen application, and that is allowing officers to remotely gather any type of digital evidence from witnesses and victims. So no longer do people need to come in to see us. We don't need to make appointments to go see them. It's really seamless. It's working very well. And the last thing I wanted to highlight is the fact that DEMS has been offering us some great opportunities to improve our records management systems here and developing some automatic retention programs to purge records in certain situations. It's allowing us to communicate privacy rights and educate the public and our own members on the collection of information, and also just advancing privacy protection overall. Next slide, please, Jill. So in the future, these are some of the areas that our project team will be looking to. We're looking to possibly pilot a transcription service. We will be expanding DEMS into our investigative service in a short period of time. We're hoping this summer to integrate with the Crown in transitioning the way we share evidence. I mentioned Axon Capture, and we will be looking at bringing a community portal here quite shortly. And the diagram below shows you how that works. It's essentially a large-scale incident may occur, homicide, something of that sort. We believe that members of the public may have information to share with us. Through social media, we can put a link out that allows the community members to submit what they feel may be evidence, and an officer can triage it on the other end. So a lot of future work to come for DEMS. If you could, next slide, please, Joe. Real briefly now, we'll talk about our body-worn video and in-car video program. As you recall, our purpose really was to determine the feasibility and our ability to capture evidence while balancing community members' rights to privacy. And our main key performance indicators that we really want to focus on: community member perceptions, the workloads that this may cause, and of course, conviction impacts. Next slide, please, Joe. So this slide and the next slide are just really an overview of the objectives of what we are trying to accomplish and hoping that we can do with this program. And next slide, please. As an update for you and a reminder, we have 76 body-worn video systems out in the community currently right now, along with 36 in-car video systems. Next slide, Joe, please. We have done some extensive community consultation. I did want to bring to your attention a general survey that we completed that was launched in June of last year. It ran for the entire period up until December. In fact, I believe it's still open. Members can still contribute to the survey. So far, we've had 760 responses to date. And on the next slide, you'll see the survey results so far. Very positive towards WRPS bringing a body-worn video program into the service. Next slide, Jill, please. We also did a pre-pilot survey. So we sent some survey questions to our members before they even had the technology in their hands. This just shows strong support pre-deployment. We will be also surveying them again at the end to measure any changes. Anecdotally, though, we're hearing very strong support from our members who have been using the systems. So it's been very well received. It's important when we're talking about body worn and in-car video that we also talk about any type of workload impacts and particularly around disclosure. So you'll see here, so far, since June of last year, we have disclosed a total of 1,300 videos for court, combination of body worn and in-car video. And you can also see that disclosures by court vary, where provincial offenses court seems to make more use of the in-car video, whereas criminal courts making a slightly more increase or use of our body worn video over in-car, but still a good mix of both. Next screen, please. So for our recommendations for the board, just some background of where we came to and how we've come to these recommendations. Originally, we had a 6-month pilot schedule, June to December. But what we found was we require additional time to evaluate some pieces and some objectives that I mentioned earlier, specifically charge and conviction impacts. And COVID had a huge impact on the court system. And because of that, trials were not able to go through. And we haven't seen and had the ability to evaluate how our body worn and in-car video may positively impact any conviction rates and pleas, anything within the court system. We're also looking for more time to evaluate how helpful this system is in resolving complaints and also any effectiveness related to our training and development of procedures. We also then, of course, want to look at workload impacts on disclosure. So internally through our own disclosure process, externally as well, the impact to our community partners. And we would really like an opportunity to see how the technology works in unique environments like special response, say negotiations, anything like that, and through Canaan. Next slide, please. So we have 2 recommendations to bring forward. First, we're looking to extend our current pilot to October of this year. And secondly, we're looking to expand it just to provide increased coverage for further evaluation. Next slide. This would be proposed over 2 phases. The first phase would be seeing an additional 75 systems brought in to our North Division and our Special Response unit immediately this spring. That would come at a pre-budgeted cost of $75,000. And then our next phase, phase 2, would see an additional approximately 167 systems brought in this summer to our South Division. And that would be for a pre-budgeted cost of $250,000. Overall, we're bringing 2 requirements to you for your approval. First, extension of the pilot, that would be retroactively from January 1st this year to October of this year. And the second is the expansion of the pilot to increase the total number of pieces of technology that we have out. And that would be at a pre-budgeted cost of $325,000. And at this point, I will turn it back over to Chief Larkin for comments or any questions. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Superintendent Morris, for the excellent, comprehensive, and thorough presentation. I just want to recognize Shana and the team has done an amazing job of rolling this out. And I take immense pride, and I hope the board also recognizes that we're leading in this process, not only provincially, but also, as you can see, national interest in the work that we're doing. And that's a credit to Shana and team and Bob and the leadership and the strong financial support from Ms. Kirsten Hand. So I'd like to open it up to the board for any questions, comments that you may have around the current modernization project, but also equally around the specific recommendations that the board may have. So again, thank you so much for the opportunity, and very proud of our special project team on this matter.
Thank you, Chief. Karen, go ahead.
Thank you, and thank you for the presentation. I mean, I think it's a hot topic when we talk about body-worn cameras, which is what my comments are going to focus on. And I have a couple of questions. I'm always nervous when it's a pilot project that it's approved, and then incrementally you see additions to that, so that there's additional sunk costs, which then becomes the logic and argument, you know, in 6 months' time. Well, we've already done all of these investments, and so we need to do it. Where, in my opinion, like, a pilot is a pilot for a reason in terms of what we're looking at. So I don't necessarily have any problems extending the time frame. It makes sense to me, the logic related to the fact that we haven't seen the progression through the court system, but that the second tranche, which is July, I would imagine isn't actually going to serve that. If I know anything about court systems, like, you don't get anything through the court system in 2 months these days. So you're actually not going to, just correct me if I'm wrong, that we're not actually going to see additional data to some of the objectives that you're looking at related to the extension of the pilot with the addition of the new cameras, like the extension to other divisions. And, notwithstanding the fact I looked at the financials that you've got budget room for that, I would have thought that, if this was something we're interested in, we would have maybe that would have been part of the original plan. I just get nervous. Poor Mark knows this about me. I get nervous about procurements. I get nervous about, when you read the document, like I get that we're piggybacking on Toronto. It just, you've got a company that, they're doing good stuff, but there's also got to be then if, we decide at some point to go ahead with this procedural fairness related to the fact that they know our systems, we're working with them to improve, efficiencies and build them in, and they're just going to have a natural competitive advantage as part of it, which doesn't necessarily make it as clean an RFP process. Again, assuming that this would be something we move forward with, which, we may not, I don't want to be presumptuous in thinking what the board may or may not approve. So that's a very long-winded thing, part A. My second question was, because we're focusing a bit on the capital side here, generally when we increase things like screening, it's not just the fact that we're screening, then part B becomes, you need more people to actually watch the video. So all of a sudden, if I've got another, 200 cameras, I'm going to need more people to then watch that and process that. And I don't remember, you can correct me if I'm wrong, I think we started off with 3 FTEs, we added another 7, we're up to 10. I don't, if you could just remind me whether or not there's additional FTE component pieces to this expansion then as well, or if it's only anticipated on the capital side as opposed to the operating side as well. Sorry, that was a lot there.
So thanks so much. I'll turn it over to our team. I'll start with part A, which is around the current recommendation, which is a pre-budgeted amount. And I will assume responsibility. Some of the delay in coming to the board was myself having the similar discussions with the team around rollout, around ensuring and asking Kirsten, our chief purchasing officer, to look at what's the large term impact by involving legal in what are the overall impacts of extending this pilot. Yes, we have a pre-budgeted amount. I think Shayna has explained that we didn't quite realize some of the feedback that we were expecting or hoping for, and Shayna can speak more to that. But I do want to let you know, Vice Chair Snar, that some of the delay in coming to the board was myself being difficult with the team, asking all of those same questions. And Deputy Crowell and Superintendent Morris and Kirsten and Bob eventually coming saying, we need to advance this. We support this. It's within our procedural bylaws. But of course, the notion would be that, again, there's no crystal ball in this. This is also tied to economic and budget impacts that we need to be cognizant of. And because all of those same questions around realignment of the work that Ms. Kate Richardson's doing around records management and digital evidence management are all part of those discussions. But I'll let Shayna and team and Mark jump in to provide answers not only on part A as well, but also part B around rollout timelines, what it looks like, why the team's looking for more feedback, more exposure. There's some specialized units being added to this, looking for that comprehensive internal feedback. So over to Mark, Shayna, and Kirsten, if you at the end want to wrap up and summarize from a CPO perspective, some of the impacts and obligations that you've taken on as the CPO.
Great. Yes, I can certainly speak to the first part of your concern, and you're correct. At increasing 167 additional units won't see any impact for us as far as charge convictions there. We're looking long-term. That's the extension piece where we need the current units that are out in the field right now. We need to see the impacts that those are having on conviction rates. But what it will give us is the ability to understand what are the workload requirements when we bring more units in for our team. So as far as managing the workload, it will be managed under what we currently have for the pilot, but it will help guide us in making and understanding recommendations for on a future expansion if we choose to go down that path. As well, right now we have it in a limited scope just on patrol, but to have the ability to have it in our special response team, where I was speaking about using it under negotiation. And currently we have technology, we have old tape recorders and things that we're doing. So it would give us an opportunity to evaluate what modernizing that unit would look like in terms of using it for high risk calls and capturing video that way, as well as for canines. So yes, I agree. Some pieces of it may not be directly relatable to conviction rates in the expansion, but the extension definitely will offer us that. And then again, the expansion will offer us a better ability to understand workload and also working through any type of complaints process and having a better understanding how we can move that along faster for our members as well.
Kirsten, do you want to weigh in on any of that, or has Shana basically covered it off? Or Mark?
I'll just add my thank you, Chair. My opening comments about us being cautious, prudent, and we feel very responsible in our approach to this is really where I give credit to the team is the network that they have nationally and provincially on assessing the workload is really where the cost is. The technology for body worn and in-car video is what it is from a unit standpoint, but it is the accrual of the evidence in the system and our ability to vet it and then disclose it that we're really assessing where is the cost from an operational perspective. So that's led to some of the delay, but also our wish to expand and extend the pilot for that full analysis. And our commitment is to come back to the board with a very responsible and fulsome analysis, should we proceed today. And then at that point, we can address the sharp and very fair questions from Ms. Schnarr about procurement, about the total return on investment analysis. And we feel like we're taking a middle of the road approach where some services have launched full in, but are now needing to scale back on their commitments because of the FTE and the total financial impacts. So very fair questions, and we've been grappling with every element of what you've suggested today.
Karen?
We're going from 70, so we have 75 now, and we're adding another, 167. So it's, we'll be at triple the number of what we have now. And if we're not increasing FTEs necessarily to support it, I guess my other question is, if we decide not to do this, that's sunk cost with the cameras then? Or how does that actually work with the company? Not to say we won't, but I'm just trying to I take Shana's point about the fact that maybe there's other groups we want to look at, but the expansions seem to me to be more than that. So are the special groups another 167, or is that are the special groups 20, and then we've got we're expanding to other? I'm just trying to figure that piece of it out. I'm honestly trying to limit exposure here because, like I said, we may do it, we may not, but it's a pilot right now.
Shana, do you want to respond?
Sure, yes. So the special groups that we're speaking to are in phase 1. They fall under phase 1. That was an additional 75 cameras. So that was to implement the remainder of North Division officers. So in the end, all of North Patrol would be using the cameras instead of just 2 shifts. And as well, it would allow us to expand that to our special response and our canines. So that would be 75. The 167 that you're referring to, that would be for us to move it to South Division and expand down there and allow our community and well-being officers to have an opportunity. They're in some very high-risk situations dealing with the public and would give us an opportunity to evaluate the systems in that type of environment as well.
Okay. I guess my question would be, and I agree with that, but I don't know how many community, out of the 167, I don't know how many of those are. My guess would be that it's not the majority of the 167. So
that's correct.
Part of this decision point is South a required thing? Is it a nice to have or a need to have? Or if what I'm hearing is really the expansion group really should be the community response. I mean, that's a different group. You'd get different informative data with that group.
So we're
Correct.
about 45 body worn videos would be the community engagement well-being team would be about 45. We'd be in the range of 35 for special response and canine. Those are the specialized units. As Shane has alluded to, traffic already is utilizing in-car and body worn video in partnership. The balance are frontline patrol officers. And so we would, the recommendation is that all of North, and there's been keen interest internally from our members in North Division to actually all of them to pilot it, and then South Division, which provides service to the city of Cambridge and North Dumfries. And so the One division that would have no body-worn video would be a central division, which would provide policing for the majority of the city of Kitchener. So if that gives you some insight, that the specialty side, it would be, 45, 5, so 80 cameras there. The balance are frontline patrol officers and supervisors.
I agree. And I don't mean to, labor the point, but if we're are going to be at 2 to 3 divisions, it almost doesn't sound like a pilot anymore when we're talking about this.
Okay, thank you for those comments and questions. Carl.
Thank you, Chair Edmund, and it's always good to follow Professor Schnarr because she throws a lot onto the table. But anyways, my question is with regards to the cost. I guess the part 2, the costs that are going to be involved. Does it include in the cost the training that's going to be involved in some of this new technology? Is that included in there, or is that extra?
Shane, it looks like it's your, over to you.
Okay. The training actually for North Division in particular, especially, is we already have one shift that's being trained on in-car video. So we're just adding body-worn video. It's very limited training there. The training would be provided by our project team. I feel that we have it down to a science now from our previous experience launching it earlier. So there's really no cost to the training. It's our members going out. We focus mostly on privacy issues. There's a very limited amount of training that's required to understand how it actually works, the system itself. It's very easy to understand and ergonomic to use. So there's not a huge training component, thankfully, for us, and a huge training investment that way. Where the investment actually is in the digital evidence management system of storing that, and that has already been completed for the most part throughout the service.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sandy, I saw your hand was up and you took it down. Was your question answered, or?
I was going along the same line as Dr. Schnarr. She covered it adequately, more than adequately. Awesome.
That's great. I guess the one question I had, if this is a pilot, is what happens in October. And I think Dr. Schnarr's questions have had that relatively well answered. And I understand the example, Shana, that you gave about being able to resolve the circumstances of somebody, a sudden death. You can't quantify that for the family. So I understand that's a huge quality improvement. But is somebody tracking sort of the savings and the improved efficiency? So when we're assessing the pilot project in October, will that be part of the input that the board considers?
It certainly is our intent. Some of those things are really hard to quantify with a number, unfortunately, but that is the intention of us asking for an extension and an expansion to give us more opportunity and more examples and a variety of situations to be able to have the ability to quantify it. But certainly that's our intent. Like I said, it can be difficult. The greater number of systems we have, it'll make that easier for us to do, though.
Thank you very much. I see no more questions. So colleagues, there are 2 recommendations that go with this report. One is to extend the pilot retroactively and forward to October 22nd to October 2022, and expansion of the program. Karen, go ahead.
Sorry, I wonder, I have no problem with the first piece, which is the extension of the pilot. That makes sense to me. I wonder, and maybe it's just me, but I'd be interested to hear from my colleagues whether or not there's sort of broad support for the full extension of, 165 as opposed to the special teams piece. And maybe it could be just an outlier. I'm fine with that, but I would be interested in feedback on that.
So along those lines, I'm going to ask that we take the 2 recommendations separately. And the first one is to extend to October, the pilot. If I could have a mover and a seconder. Moved by Sandy, seconded by Karen. All those in favor, please indicate support by raising your hand. That is carried. The second is the expansion of the program. And if I could have a mover and a seconder, we can discuss that. Moved by Carl. Okay, Ian, are you seconding it? Okay, so it's now on the floor. We can have a discussion. Karen, do you want to sort of further demonstrate your concerns about this?
Yeah, I just, like I said, I have no, to me, there's great logic in extending it to new communities. I think the community service piece makes sense. That's new input and that's going to be new information. And I think that's going to be incredibly helpful. Again, I just worry that this is technically supposed to be a pilot. And so as soon as we start expanding, just sort of broadly, it doesn't sound necessarily like a pilot as much anymore, because it's, I'm not sure what additional we may get new information. It doesn't, in some cases, potentially address some of the original concerns about having that data for the court piece. There is a financial expense to this, and I'm not sure I heard what happens if we decide to not move ahead with this going forward in terms of the equipment or whatever we've purchased. Like, I don't know if there's a buyback piece. I don't know what's built into the contract related to that. So I'm just, in some cases, I'm not arguing that this is a poor, a negative program. I just want to limit our exposure as part of this, which is a pilot at this point.
So is there anybody from the service that can speak to, is there a buyback process, or what are our options in October should we decide we're not going to continue to expand, but we may continue this pilot project, but in a different way?
So essentially, we've purchased the in-car cameras, but the actual body-worn video are part of the pilot project expenditures. So if we didn't continue, we would just return them to the vendor. We actually own and have purchased the in-car video, and we continue to refine that process. And so ultimately, as we roll through here, want to assure the board that, we wouldn't be owning, all like these 200 plus body worn cameras that would be sitting in a box. They're essentially part of the pilot that we've agreed to with the vendor. So it's part of the larger purchase. We would still own the in-car video again, and our IT branch continues to actually work around in-car camera video. There's opportunities for the next generation of automated license plate readers, et cetera, where in-car video may integrate with the system. So in my view, and on behalf of the service, we view that as a good, solid investment as we roll through here. Also, particularly around, our traffic service cars that deal significantly with traffic infractions and violations. As Shayna alluded to, we're still evaluating the return on investment, but from Provincial Offense Court, we've received really positive feedback on the actual video. So that would be, hopefully that answers your question, Vice Chair Schnarr, on that piece.
Thank you for that. Sandy, go ahead.
Excuse me. Thank you. Chief kind of answered my question, and I'm assuming that if you're asking to expand a pilot project, that you're not seeing any flags or concerns with the project to date, or any reason why you wouldn't carry on and expand it further down the road. That's sort of a question and an assumption.
Yeah, no, obviously we think that, I think that this is a matter of, I think we've always had these discussions around body worn video and in-car camera. It's not if, it's when. We do recognize that we want to take a very strategic, prudent approach. Some agencies forgoed a pilot project. That wasn't our approach. We wanted significant community feedback, special stakeholder feedback that our team's done exceptionally well, court feedback, but also want to understand the true impact on disclosure and how we do some of those pieces. And so, those are all things that we continue to look at. Definitely, this is emerging technology. It's used globally, particularly in the United Kingdom and throughout Europe, throughout the United States. It's used extensively. And so we know that it continues to emerge. We've heard from our community that they, strongly support it, and quite frankly, from our members, actually very much support the use of technology. It's not without challenges, but I think you're right, Mayor Shantz, is that we are looking for some more quantitative data to actually understand what's the overall workload impact, what does this do for our court systems, what does it do internally, what are the actual complete, how do we come to the board with a complete, actually comprehensive evaluation, including a financial impact, not just for 2023, but actually for the next 3 to 5 years. And there is a financial implication. Some of my colleagues in other services, Hamilton being one of them, have forgone actually even attempting to pilot this based on, it's not in our financial budgeting plan right now. And so I think that those are the balances. And so I think that there's likely, depending on where the board goes, I mean, I can certainly provide some insight from a chief's perspective on maybe ways of altering the recommendation and allowing us to look at how do we continue to an expansion into some specialized areas, yet actually, managing the board concerns about this whole piece. And quite frankly, these are discussions we've had with Kirsten in legal. At what point do we, cross a threshold of we're so far down a road that this is sort of where we're at. So they're all valid concerns, and I can tell you all that we've debated in boardrooms, and which is why it's taken to April to actually even come forward on this point. Much to the incredible energy of our team doing amazing work. So I think there's opportunities to find a midpoint, but I'll wait till the board speaks, and then potentially Chair Redmond, offer some opportunities for some modifications here if the board so directs and wishes.
Thank you. Sandy, any further questions or comments?
Yeah, thank you. I don't have a problem supporting the recommendation as it is with that explanation. It sounds like this is a direction we are going to need to go in, and what you're just trying to do is sort of put good procedures in place to go along with it. So I can support the recommendation.
Thanks, Sandy. Tony, go ahead.
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair. Just a couple thoughts and a couple questions. And I don't know if it's, for Dr. Schnarr, maybe it's semantics on the word pilot, because that's what strikes me as well. Is I thought the pilot project was the study group in North Division to try to test all of this, and then from that study group understand the impacts to the organization and the cost benefit of having the body worn cameras. So I hear what Dr. Schnarr is saying, because now we're saying we didn't get enough information from that sample group at North. We need to expand it. So I have one question. Is that what is being asked? Is that the sample group of the North Division was not maybe a sufficient sample size to really understand the impacts to the organization, and therefore we need to look to expand that sample group? Is that what's being asked here in order for it to still be a pilot?
So who would be able to answer that question?
Well, probably, I think Superintendent Morris and Deputy Crow have been really focused on that portion. So I'll flip it over to Shane and Mark to provide comment on their rationale and reason for that process. So over to you, Shane and Mark.
Sure, yeah. So to answer your question, really, we're looking at a bigger cross section to evaluate. So a broader sense of experiences, and also to assess the workload when we increase the number. What restrictions or what constraints does that put on our resources to be able to handle that amount? How does that impact our community partners? So it's really not just taking North Division, but making a bigger sample size to see what pressure points that puts on us. So when we bring a recommendation back at the end of the pilot, that we have a more broader ability to give you a bigger picture of what we're looking at in the future for a wider expansion down the road, if that's the way that we choose to recommend.
Deputy Crow, did you want to add anything to that?
Just supporting those comments, Madam Chair. In essence, we've been trying to, with some balance, trying to maximize this, pilot opportunity. And to your point, yes, in essence, we're looking to expand, with some increased analysis, the cross section of deployment. Our interest in South Division is also trying to assess, are there unique impacts region wide? We could come to you and with a business case to extrapolate the current environment at North to say these are our metrics, to extrapolate what a broader recommended deployment would mean. And really, we're trying to maximize the opportunity within the budgeted, approval that carried through from last year to today. So we believe that, we're hearing the feedback. We agree with all of the concerns, from moving to a procurement standpoint, but we still are at the board's direction in terms of, as a community, as a service, as a board, do we want to expand this technology on a permanent basis? And that evaluation is still to come in the fall, where we can come with a fulsome, evaluation on what's been learned to date, and then as a community and as a board, we can decide, is the ROI there?
Thank you. Tony?
Through you, Madam Chair, if I can just add to that question. So I hate to bring it down to a point, but Deputy, so right now it appears we're unable to understand the full impact, or what the impacts, or extrapolate the impacts from the sample side of North Division for this type of with this technology would have on the organization. Did I say that correctly, or did you understand my question? So the sample size in North Division is not sufficient that would allow us to extrapolate and understand the full impacts to the larger organization. So we need to expand that sample size to understand what those impacts might be before you can make a recommendation on a larger basis.
So who would like to take that? Deputy Crowell?
In essence, I mean, that I agree with your sharpening of that point. You recall that the platoons at North Division, had a mixed deployment. Some had body worn cameras, some had no technology themselves, some only had in-car camera. And so the expansion of North would provide us that more fulsome analysis. But simultaneous to that, our hope was to expand it to other specialized units, and also, a recommendation to try another division to learn from a fulsome perspective, to provide the full evaluation, is where we've landed within this envelope. But knowing that there's a full stop at the end of the road here, we can say we're at a decision point from investment and procurement permanently.
So if I could just to keep going back. So some of these expansion areas could have operational differences than that of North Division, and you want to explore those operational differences and how they would impact body-worn cameras and how that technology would work in those different operational models. Is that what you're at? Is that what you're saying? Okay.
In short, yes.
Okay, no, I appreciate that. Thanks. Sorry, I'm a little bit long-winded sometimes, so I apologize. So,
but I do feel compelled on that point, though, is that, I think that the cross section is really around the specialized units. I mean, we understand that, the patrol calls for service are different environments, a different city. But I do think we need to be quite candid with the board, is that, it's the same calls for service. It's, we potentially have a North Division officer working in South Division being redeployed, and they would have body worn video and in-car camera in that community because they've been redeployed to meet staffing challenges and needs. So I just caution that, what we're looking for specifically, I think Superintendent Morris has highlighted, the cross section of special response, canine, and community engagement is a different policing application. The expansion of patrol to patrol, like when we expand in North Division, the phase, we're essentially expanding it to other patrol officers. So, I mean, the capturing of the video and the nature of the calls for service will be similar to the two platoons that are actually doing the work. So I do want to clarify that and be very clear to the board that the cross-section piece is really around the specialized units, which provide a different venue, very tactical, high risk. Canine does a very unique role in our organization, and community engagement does a unique neighborhood engagement and different work. So I do feel compelled to, on behalf of the executive, to make that very clear.
I appreciate that clarification, because for me, it now shines a new light onto the expansion of the pilot project, from what I had seen before. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. Ian, go ahead.
Thank you, and through you, Chair Redmond. I think some of the questions have already been raised, but let me kind of go through. I think that the term pilot, because when we did approve this, it was more contained, and I come from both in private sector as well as public sector of pilots that suddenly become or not suddenly, but evolve into a full full operation without having, come to that evaluation. So I see the concern. I think part of looking back on this, so certainly until my time on the board, transparency, safety, evidence. There's a whole bunch of reasons here that we got into this, and I guess for me, that's like, what's the true cost of out year budgets is more of the concern. I think. I mean, I'm not putting words in Dr. Schnarr's mouth, but like that's I think if that's what you're trying to get at is a true reflection, that's worthwhile pursuing. But having said that, if we're not going to use this technology, right, and say we're going to move forward, then for me the question is, then what? If we're not doing in camera and the body worn, so there's the status quo isn't really an option. But it does speak, and I guess like the question I would have more for the chief is, do we continue this pilot to October and then come back with here's what we do know, and we're not going to have maybe that expanded universe to tell us what the operational costs would be, but based on the pilot that we've done in October, here's what it's going to cost and here's how we would roll it out. Because I guess it's the delta of, if we do the expanded pilot, how much more do you actually get when in terms of the financial impact moving forward? Because you've raised some issues around, can a program like this use civilian, data professionals for some of the, it seems to be more on the data side that is, you wear them, you've got all this information, what do you do with it? So I guess that's the question is, I know you got a recommendation. It sounds like you struggled with it. I think we're struggling with it too. I see the value in the project as a whole. I'm not hearing, or at least I'm not that smart, so it's entirely likely that I've missed the answer, but I'm not hearing that there's such a compelling argument that in expanding it, that we'll have a data point that at the end of it will say, well, so, we've got such clear evidence that we should move forward, any more than if we just expanded the pilot to whatever it is, October or August, and then make an evaluation. So that to me is the question to you, Chief, is that's what I kind of need to hear, is some clarity around that piece.
So I'm just going to jump in and say we have voted to extend the existing pilot. What we're talking about now is expansion, Ian, and I appreciate your sort of teasing.
I do get that. I mean, we're extending that, but I mean, we can leave it like that and say you're coming back at the end of the extension with a full report and say, here's how we would operationalize it. Because right now it is a pilot and it's either go or no go. I think the part of expanding the pilot is where I'm not hearing, and again, maybe I didn't hear it clearly enough, that there's such a that you think that there's going to be so much more evidence of bringing more clarity to what the final impact would be on full rollout.
So, Chief, I'm just going to jump in here because I think Ian has sort of delineated some of the issues. It sounds to me like if there is an expansion, and there was obviously a lot of debate within the service about this recommendation, can you talk a little bit? I mean, I think additional groups, when you talked about neighborhood engagement and the K-9 unit, that might be additional information that is now not being covered. So I'm wondering from the services perspective, if there's a middle ground here, if it could be reworked so that it doesn't feel like the pilot's sort of taking over, but we could find pockets of additional information. So I'm tagging on to Ian's concern, and I'll turn it over to you.
Well, thanks so much, and thanks for the robust discussion. I think this is really important, and certainly from my perspective, all discussions I've had with Deputy Crowell and Deputy Hilton around the predictability of the board's concerns, and I think they're all valued, and we very much understand that. I do think that there's value, and I do thank the board for expanding the pilot to October, because I do think it will provide Superintendent Morris much more time to understand the larger implications, some of the challenges, to bring a more comprehensive, robust financial evaluation on return on investment and some of the different issues and challenges we learn. The more you have something in place, the more you every day learn something new as we roll through here. And so I do think that there's tremendous value. The October date was picked because it does align with our budget preparation. And we know that this year is slightly different based on municipal election, and we know that the budget timelines will be slightly altered. But we did actually want to get to the board with a comprehensive review and an evaluation so the board could make an informed decision, and to all of your points, a multi-year financial decision, because we know that this has a financial piece. My general style is one of collaboration, and I do think that there is a middle ground. And so if I may, with your permission, Chair Redmond, is that I would ask that, the board has, I think, in many ways provided direction around, can you go back and rework this and actually return with an opportunity of what does the true expansion look like, and what does actually Superintendent Morris's team need for good quantification of different areas. And that may include, special response, canine, which, under the leadership of Superintendent Bursey, have been two areas where they've come to Superintendent Morris saying, we'd like to pilot this and see the impact on the work that we do. And secondly, community engagement, Superintendent Havel and Staff Goodman have come forward saying, there may be value in all of this in our interactions as we roll through here. There may be other opportunities for us internally to actually transition, for example, existing pilot cameras in the north to other areas. So if we want to see how it deploys in south, we may actually choose to do that and actually go with different members, et cetera. There's likely some implications and all those things, but those are things we can work out. So I think that, if the board is comfortable, this can be returned to us to come up with an enhanced strategy to return to the board in May with a more clarified approach around that process. Again, I do see value in the work that we're doing. I do support continued review and whether we call it pilot expansion, I think that those are monikers because I do actually ultimately believe it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when we deploy this emerging technology. And again, I do think we need to advocate provincially that there should be opportunities for support and funding of some of this technology. So that's what I believe, Chair Redmond, is we can find a happy median. I would recommend it right now, but I need Ms. Hand to provide some of the financial implications of what maybe we land on recommendations, and hence the team and the staff would need to go back, pull together the numbers, work with the vendor on what is the actual financial implications. And because the money's budgeted, it doesn't mean that we need to actually spend it, right? I think we need to be, very strategic and wise in the use of our community dollars, and they are community dollars. They're funded by our citizens, and so I think we need to be very strategic in how we do that. So again, ultimately, as the chief, I certainly do believe that I can work with Deputy Crowell and Deputy Hilton to refine, and the team to refine this. Deputy Hilton does have a large voice in this because it's actually in her area and sphere of leadership where these are deployed. The technology piece is largely tied to Deputy Crowell and Superintendent Morris and Bob. And then, of course, our amazing Kirsten is always monitoring what's the financial implications, what's the staffing implications, and what does this look like. So my recommendation is you push this back, have me do more work, and come back to the board.
So Ian, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say with those comments, I don't know if I rescind my moving of the motion, but I think we could lay it on the table or refer it to next month's meeting so the chief can do some work on it if that's agreeable to the rest of the board.
So I was just going to make the comment, we have actually voted in support of extending the current pilot. Can these two motions be taken separately, Chief, or would you rather have the whole thing referred back?
No, because I do think actually the current cameras we have deployed, we're now continuing those projects. So we have 75 cameras and I think 8 in-car cameras. I hope I got those numbers right, Superintendent Morris. That continued pilot would continue, and we continue to do evaluation and surveys. And then what you'll likely see and what I forecast in May is myself coming back on behalf of our team, making a recommendation for an expansion of specialized areas, which would provide Superintendent Morris's team a new quantitative cross-section of police work and what's the impact on those specialized teams, and is there value? Because I think, at the end of this, if we forecast to the future, the board may make a decision and say, in these areas, we really think there's value. We think there's tremendous value in these areas, but right now it's just not part of our strategic capital plan or operating plan, et cetera. There's some hypothetical and some opportunities for the board to make some very strategic decisions in the fall.
So for further clarity, so we have moved to extend the existing pilot, and Ian, you're moving to defer the second motion back to staff to come back in May, correct?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Seconder to defer the second motion. Karen, thank you. So it's been moved and seconded to refer this back to staff to come back in May. All those in favor? Okay, that is carried. Thank you, colleague. Good discussion. 11.3 Waterloo Regional Police Service 2022 first quarter impact update. Chief, do you want to introduce this?
Thanks so much. Very pleased to welcome Staff John Goodman and Miss Amanda Francini, both who are doing significant amount of work in this area. And once again, want to highlight that yesterday the province did announce particular funding that will support the ongoing work and the leadership of Staff Superintendent Goodman, Inspector Houston, and others around the work of how we actually triage and manage police involvement in mental health calls for service. And so welcome, John and Amanda. I think that this is a good news report. We are seeing pressures around wellness in our community. I think it's to be expected as we come out of the pandemic, as we also cope with economic pressures and all kinds of different social issues which are impacting all of us. But very proud of our relationship with CMHA and the amazing work of CMHA and the impact team, the civilian professionals, the mental health clinicians that are doing work in partnership with our policing team are top-notch, just caring, empathetic human individuals that want to make a difference. And I do want to remind the board that in 2012, our service was one of the first in the province, in partnership with other services such as Hamilton and Toronto, that launched specialized crisis teams. And in 2018, there was a refresh and partner with CMHA, where the board in gratuities did offer up room within our divisions, and we changed to this impact model. But this isn't something new, where we've been looking at innovative ways to support those in need. But again, we see the impact team continues to evolve and grow thanks to the leadership of John and others, with stringent evaluation, and thanks to the expertise of Amanda and team. So good morning, John and Amanda, over to you.
Thank you, Chief. Morning, Chair Redmond. Morning, Board. Stole a lot of my words there, Chief. So in a matter of time here, I'm going to turn over to Amanda to read through the data.
Good morning. Happy to provide a walkthrough of the data. These WRPS quarterly reports are a great reflection of demand and service, and this set of data pertains to January, February, and March of 2022. So referring to page 1, in terms of volume by quarter, the volume tends to ebb and flow, similar to calls for service and calls to our communication center. Q1 is typically lower than Q4. What's more noteworthy is the comparison to the same time frame last year, which is up 21%. Those stats across 2020 and 2021 were part of an unstable model given COVID. I still think it's speaking to the demand. In general, weekdays, and specifically between 9 a.m. and 9 p.m., are the highest demand for the impact team. Referring to page 2, the same 5 call types are the highest demand for the impact team, especially mentally ill calls. And on page 3, we compare the proportion of mentally ill calls and attempt suicide calls that impact is requested for and dispatched to. It's increasing compared to the impact dispatches region-wide, and we use our neighborhood policing stats as a comparator. One standout statistic is that the impact team was available to be dispatched 99% of the time they were requested. There were only 2 times across 3 months that they weren't available, and those were outliers. A Monday at 7 a.m. in January and a Monday at 2 a.m. in March. Otherwise, the impact team was requested and dispatched. Back to you, Staff Superintendent.
Thank you, Amanda. Any questions for Amanda and I?
Just have to say that's a very impressive statistic. Karen, go ahead.
Thank you. I just wanted to say I am delighted that this is in sort of the main body of our meeting today as opposed to consent. I think it's incredibly important. We get questions all of the time about what the service is doing to support, individuals in need in this area. And I think, this information allows us to have a deeper window into what is actually happening, the collaboration, related to the impact team. I think when Amanda was just saying the fact that essentially this team in the first quarter, I know you were conservative and said 99%. Essentially, it was 100% within the time window of when, the impact team is operational during a day. I think that is outstanding. It's tough, right? Because the only if you're at 100%, the only way to go is down. So working to maintain that, and I think speaking to the whole last discussion was resource allocation, and so making sure as we have these conversations, there's only one pot of money that we have, to make sure that things like this are appropriately resourced in terms of making sure we are there to help people in distress as part of the work that the service does. So just again, a thank you to John, the work your team does, and Amanda providing that update, because I think it is as a topic in our community, as we see unfortunately more instances of mental challenges with mental health and well-being. This is going to be an ongoing and really important topic for the board to continue to be informed about and have conversations about to make sure it's adequately addressed to the best of our ability.
Thank you very much. I would agree. It's a topic of conversation, and we have evidence of service provided. So it's a very important statistic. I see no further questions. Thank you very much. Oh, Sandy, go ahead.
I'm sorry, thanks. Just a quick question. So there are still a lot of calls that aren't attended by impact. Presumably they're outside their hours of operation. Where do we stand in terms of increasing impact surveillance? I realize it's not our decision to make, but can you comment on how the impact team is expanding or not?
So thanks so much. We've actually have received some increases. Their hours now are from 8 a.m. till 12 a.m. So they're capturing almost, 18 hours of the day, 7 days a week, which I think is extensive. We do a lot of analytical pieces around time of day. And in reality, I think John would confirm this. After 2 a.m., the need for impact is limited. And so we would, our preference as a police service would see investments during the 8 a.m. to 12 a.m. timeframe. So I think our next, Mayor Schantz, our next strategy or step is to continue to advocate for more impact members during those days. Or I think when we see the addition of our mental health clinicians, which will be a part of the impact program in our communications center, we hope to actually alleviate 20 to 25% of calls for service. So we should also see a reduction and a better outcome for the citizen by our communications center receiving the call, having it triaged by the clinician, and making a decision to say, this actually shouldn't even get to the front line of policing. This should land here, 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 and here. So that may also allow impact opportunities to take on other work and other follow-ups, which will have better outcomes for the citizens we serve. And so I think that's where we're at. I mean, I know some services are advocating for 24/7. We're not there yet. We believe that, investing in time of day and the right allocation at the right time or right place is the way to go. But John, did I miss anything on that whole component piece? Feel free to add.
No, you touched on it. We rely heavily on the data, and we rely heavily on Amanda to make sure that we're getting it right, and we're continue moving forward on this. And with the new piece in the communication center, that should help us a lot. Hopefully.
Thank you very much. Any further questions or comments, Sandy?
No, thanks. That's great, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much for that great report and that update, John and Amanda. And the next agenda item is 11.4, 2022 Quarterly Use of Force Statistic Report, Q1.
Thanks, Chair Edmund. And again, this is an ongoing quarterly report to the board. I'm pleased to welcome Inspector Jason Boucher and our team that has been doing a significant amount of work, including support from strategic services, from our race-based data collection team, Kate Richardson, Margaret Glode. Again, I think we're making some significant work, and there's more work to be done. In fact, upcoming this week, we'll have Dr. Jacobs joining our leadership team on advancing some strategies, looking and analyzing the data. But we're at the end of Q1 for 2022, and I'm pleased to welcome Inspector Jason Boucher from our Training and Education branch. Good morning, Jason.
Good morning, Chief, Chair Redmond, members of the board. And thanks to Jill for her technical assistance as always. Just as a primer, reportable incidents are those that require use of force report by legislation, WRPS procedure. Recall that a reportable incident may generate several use of force reports, one for each officer involved, excluding team reports, those for our emergency response team, and each of the reports go through 3 levels of scrutiny. So Jill, next slide, please. The number of occurrences this quarter has dropped from 77,245 to 72,001, as have arrests from 3,899 to 3,692. The use of force incidents, however, have increased over this time from 69 to 93. And again, while each of these is significant and requires scrutiny, this number remains very small relative to overall occurrences, which is indicative of our members' ability to use appropriate intervention strategies before resolving situations through use of force options. Citizens' calls for service continue to drive the vast majority of occurrences, which result in use of force at 77%. And this is consistent with what drives occurrences in general, and is therefore to be expected. The remainder is made up of the execution of warrants, assisting other agencies, which are often other police services, and those which are classified as officer initiated, those things such as traffic stops or person stops, which account for approximately 5% of these occurrences. Next slide, please. This slide provides an analysis of what call types resulted in intervention involving reportable incidents. You'll note again that the predominant driver continues to be dangerous weapons calls, those in which a weapon is believed or known to be involved. You will note as well that dangerous weapons calls requiring a use of force response increased significantly from the Q4 of last year. You also recall from last quarter where we discussed that simply because a call is not classified as a dangerous weapons call does not mean that a weapon is not involved. Other incidents may also involve weapons. However, the call type is classified in another way if the incident better fits that category. I would turn your attention to Appendix C in this report for examples of this. Next slide, please. This table summarizes use of force options utilized excluding conducted energy weapons, which we will see on the next slide. As we have said in the past, use of force reports were and are intended primarily to allow for oversight of the appropriateness of officer response to a particular situation. In addition, we can attempt to spot trends in the data over time. For instance, the introduction of the conducted energy weapon has resulted in a marked and sustained decline of use of other secondary weapons, such as OC spray and a baton. Now, a quick examination of this table, however, illustrates how volatile a small data set can be. Most of these numbers have fluctuated significantly over time, and we expect this trend to continue. In this quarter, an officer discharged their handgun in one instance. This was to defend against a dog which was attacking our officers. This application does not meet the threshold of reporting to the Special Investigations Unit. And finally, there were no canine deployments during this quarter, which met the threshold of a use of force report. Next slide, please, Joe. This slide provides a breakdown of conducted energy weapon use. There were a total of 76 conducted energy weapon deployments in various forms in this quarter versus 44 in the previous quarter. Recall that a procedural change between 2019 and 2020, which now requires our officers to report on CEW deployment simply due to the removal of the CEW from the holster in the presence of a member of the public, resulted in a significant increase in the drawn-only category. The conducted energy weapon continues to demonstrate its effectiveness at de-escalating a situation simply through its display. Next slide, please. Minor injuries to subjects increased this quarter from 0 to 2, and to those of officers from 0 to 4. As well in this quarter, an incident which occurred in February of this year, where 2 of our officers were stabbed and required hospitalization, occurred in an incident in Cambridge. It was during this incident that officers were required to discharge a handgun to interrupt a dog attack. This incident, which began as a motor vehicle collision, escalated quickly. Recall that a procedural change in 2020 classifying any CW probe deployment requiring paramedic services to attend and remove probes is considered a minor injury for the purpose of reporting. And there were no subject injuries reported as serious in this quarter. Next slide, please. As you know, the province of Ontario required the reporting of an officer or on-officer perception of subject race and provided the race-based data categories by which this would be done at the beginning of 2020. Figure 6 provides a summary of this data. Because of the challenges that we identified in using the use of force report to collect data of this type, our service made the decision to provide raw data in Appendix C of the report that we've provided to you. This appendix provides a summary of the subject's perceived race, how the call was generated, the type of occurrence, along with a short synopsis of the circumstances, the subject's profile behavior upon which the choice of intervention response was based, along with the response of the officer. Next slide, please. And finally, despite the frequency of interactions with members of our community, at 72,000 occurrences and approximately 3,700 arrests in this reporting period, very few, or approximately 0.1%, resulted in reportable incidents. Injuries to both subjects and officers occurring during these incidents remains very low. Again, de-escalation training has been effective and will continue to be the cornerstone of our officer intervention training. In 2022, we continue this commitment with the officer intervention and EDI components. And while the provincially mandated use of force report remains a valuable tool for analyzing officer actions, several deficiencies have been identified which limit comprehensive data analysis. And finally, the last slide, please. Use of force reporting to the board will continue on a quarterly basis. And we continue to work with the training and education unit and the equity, diversity, inclusion unit to incorporate EDI principles into our training. In fact, underway this year is cultural awareness training, which will be delivered to all of our staff. With that, Chief, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thanks so much, Jason. And again, Chair Redmond, look forward to any questions and or dialogue from the board in relation to the Q1 use of force statistics. Again, we're very pleased with the work that our members are doing, the high level of training and education they continue to receive. And of course, there's always ongoing development. I also want to recognize Jason for his national work. He continues to co-chair a roundtable on behalf of the RCMP Commissioner and the CCP Office of the President with Assistant Commissioner Dennis Daly, where they're looking at a nationwide renewed, re-engaged framework for police intervention. And so there's lots of good work going. And again, I just want to take a moment with some pride to recognize that our community is leading thanks to Jason's leadership, and it's gone remarkably well. And we do believe that we'll transform the nationwide framework around police intervention, race-based data collection, use of force data collection, lots of amazing work going. So thank you, Jason, for your national leadership.
I'm not seeing any questions or comments, but again, thank you very much for continuing to be transparent and report this important statistic as we move forward. Thank you very much, Jason. 11.5 Emergency Operations Center final report. It was attached to our minutes, and I will turn it back over to you, Chief.
Thanks so much, Chair Redmond. On behalf of Deputy Crowell and Deputy Hilton, we're very excited in some ways to bring a final report around Emergency Operations Center, although I guess the new term is we're learning to live with COVID. That's the new term that we're all embracing. But again, it's hard to believe that over 24 months ago, when the pandemic hit, as an organization, we wanted to ensure business continuity. We knew that we would have an obligation 24/7 to our community. And so we asked Superintendent Tom Bursey to lead our internal initiative with strong support from a series of leaders, Inspector Mancuso, Inspector Dietrich, And of course, two main players, Miss Nancy Mahar and Mr. Nick Jonkman. Nancy's our health and safety advisor. Mr. Nick Jonkman is our emergency planning coordinator and our business continuity coordinator. I think we've done as an organization amazing around not only workforce, but community protection, as well as all things pandemic. And there were some challenging times throughout that. So pleased to welcome Superintendent Bursey, Nick and Nancy. And I'll turn it over to Superintendent Bursey to open the presentation. Good morning, Tom.
Thanks, Chief. Good morning. And I'm going to turn over directly to Nancy and Nick. And I think Nick's going to lead it off today. They're presenting jointly from one office, so you'll see them bounce in and off the screen as they share the presentation. So thanks very much, Nick. I'll turn it over to you.
Good morning, Chair Redmond and board. Thank you for having us this morning. I'll just share my screen here so that we can get the presentation started. Oops. Okay, so what we're going to be doing this morning is we're going to be presenting a brief overview of the successes and lessons learned and some brief background on the Emergency Operations Center, which was started in March of 2020, or 2020. So in March 2020, the Emergency Operations Center was started to provide a coordinated service response to the evolving pandemic. It was located in our WRPS headquarters. The staffing of the EOC was varied throughout the pandemic based on the resources required to manage the service's internal response to COVID-19. As Superintendent Bursey alluded to, it was led by our Operational Support Division within the Emergency Services branch. The organizational structure of the EOC followed the Incident Management System, which is the provincial standard provided by the province of Ontario and used by our partners at both the region and municipalities, which allowed us to communicate effectively and coordinate with them for any kind of joint needs or services. IMS is, as I said, is a standardized approach to emergency management. It provides standardized organizational structures, functions, processes, and terminology for emergency response in Ontario. The initial EOC operational structure is the EOC commander, along with the emergency information officer, safety officer, operations, planning, logistics, finance, and IT. In the beginning, it consisted both of full-time and part-time members from across the service, consisting of all of those people mentioned before. Oh, I'm sorry, can you guys see the presentation at all, or?
Oh, you have it now, yeah.
Okay, sorry about that. So we have the EOC structure there. I'm not sure what's happening.
Sorry.
Just want to switch screens maybe.
So Nick, just so you know, Jill is sharing your screen. So when
Okay.
you want to advance it, just say advance.
Okay, I'll do that. So next slide, please. So in the members that were seconded full-time to the EOC were the Inspector of Emergency Services, the Emergency Planning, myself, the Emergency Planning and Business Continuity Advisor. We had various members from the Major Events Unit seconded to it, as well as our Health and Safety Advisor, Nancy Mahar, as well as several members from Patrol who were brought in to help and assist throughout the pandemic. Our part-time support came from finance and asset management. Our public information officers provided a key communication to our internal members, as well as strategic services. So as you can see, it was like it was a team effort from across the service. If I can get to the next slide, please. So our primary responsibilities of the EOC was the safety of our members and the community, as well as develop and distribute internal information bulletins and directive. That was one of our key focuses, was really communicating the actions that the service was taking to protect our members and ensure that members were familiar with those the COVID-19 legislations and regulations, as well as new and amended procedures and our weekly updates to WRPS membership. Next slide, please. Some of our additional responsibilities were supporting and guidance for members who have experienced exposures. This is something that Nancy will speak to in a little bit more detail. The EOC provided the safety officer for 7 days a week during business hours, and as well as 24-hour support as members began to test positive or develop symptoms. We were the primary point of contact with our regional, provincial, and federal partners, as well as the health departments and external agencies involved in pandemic-related enforcement. So we provided a lot of information to them, and they provided information to us. I'm now going to hand it over to Nancy for the second part of the presentation.
Good morning, Chair, Chief Larkin, members of the board. For the next few slides, I'm going to walk you through key strategies that we use to manage the pandemic and to provide a safe working environment to members of WRPS. Some of this may be a review, but I just wanted to highlight the successes that we've had here. So we implemented a number of engineering safety measures, such as plexiglass barriers, a queuing system, physical distancing with the restructuring of furniture, which provided a safer interaction between our members and members of the public. Next slide, Jill, please. We also utilized some process-driven health and safety measures, such as physical distancing of workspaces, restricting room capacities. We installed over 50 sanitization stations so that every member still here had access to cleaning and sanitizing products. Next slide, please. Early on in the pandemic, our HR team, along with legal, IT, put together a work from home strategy. And this was successfully implemented and quickly adaptable throughout the course of the pandemic based on the province's stage as we move back and forth. Next slide, please. The COVID-19 screening app. So this, as the province required, a method for organizations to screen employees for COVID-19 symptoms. Our screening evolved from passive screening, posters on the door, to active screening. They had to complete a form and hand it in, to eventually we landed on an app, which was a great tool for us. Whenever a member screened positive, an automatic email went to one of the EOC health and safety officers, and we would touch base with that member right away and provide them guidance based on public health case and contact management guidelines. So since March 2020, the EOC was very busy. We created and published over 340 documents. These includes directives, information bulletins, flowcharts, and many other supporting documents. We completed over 439 objectives on our incident action plan. So every day we'd have a briefing and we determine what our objectives and to-do list was for that day. Also, we reviewed and processed and responded to over 8,000 emails from members to our COVID-19 email account. The COVID-19 impact on membership, each phase of the pandemic has been very unique and posed different challenges. So in 2020, the service encountered 6 positive cases of COVID-19. One was related to an on-duty exposure. And overall, we managed 1,318 COVID-related absences. So these were due to illness or isolation protocols as guided by public health. In 2021, we had 70 positive cases, 17 related to on-duty exposure, and managed 1,672 COVID-related absences. I just want to point out that any of our on-duty exposures or COVID-19 cases thought to be due to workplace exposure were reported to the Ministry of Labor and WSIB as required. Then in 2022, the Omicron wave hit fast, and we saw 166 positive cases, 13 related to on-duty exposures. But between January and April 3rd, we managed 474 COVID-19 absences. And at this point in time, we also saw a change in isolation rules. So the number of absences being managed decreased. Thanks, Jill. We had to utilize a number of internal communication strategies in order to reach our members across the service. So we had obviously a COVID-19 dedicated web page. We had our weekly WRPS Express newsletter where we featured updates to documents and key information. E-briefings also went out to our uniform members to make sure that they were receiving pertinent information. Next slide, please. We utilized WRPS TV, posters and banners, like I said, to get those key messages out to members across our service. The COVID-19 exposure tracking sheet was a very useful tool for us. It started out in the beginning as a very basic Excel spreadsheet, to track members that were returning from out of country travel. And it turned into a very critical database that we use to track exposures, both on duty and off duty, assess risk level, monitor exposure status, determine who was at work, who was off work by branch and area, so we could help determine staffing levels and where staffing was going to be impacted. Next slide, please. For the last few slides, I'm going to take you back to Nick. Thank you for your time. Enjoy your day.
Okay, so just to cap off, we wanted to kind of celebrate some of our successes within the EOC. So one of them being that establishing the EOC, which was a new precedent for the service to take, that we would be the central point of contact for the service and our partners when dealing with COVID-19, as well as ensuring a consistent response to COVID-19 rules, which, as we all know, changed regularly throughout the pandemic. So it was important for us to have that central point of contact and develop the expertise required to respond to the pandemic, as well as development of the regional response protocols response directive with our community partners. This ensured that we established clear roles and responsibilities for COVID-19 enforcement, and it reduced the number of COVID-19 calls on our frontline officers, which was really good to have. Our implementation of the COVID-19 integrated response team during the peak of the anti-COVID-19 measures and protests and civil disobedience was also a high point, in that we were able to put together this unit very quickly to help respond to the increase in calls for those COVID-19 related issues. Next slide, please. As well, we wanted to celebrate the service's support to purchase and install and provide all recommended safety equipment. That was never a question. When we said we needed it, we got it, which we want to thank our executive leadership team for doing that. As well as the employee COVID-19 screening app. This was something that was really useful for members to be using, and it helped screen out people before they showed up and risking infection on other people. And lastly, the health and safety team provided significant support to our members throughout the pandemic. Every day they were, making phone calls to members who tested positive or suspected to have tested or to have been positive. We were reaching out to family members or members who were sick for other reasons. Support went above and beyond what many other services were providing, and it was greatly appreciated by the members. Next slide, please. So there were a few challenges that we overcame, and these were not unique to WRPS. I think they were globally an issue at the time. So early stages of the pandemic, acquiring enough PPE was challenging. What we have done now is we've taken steps to control our own PPE supply chain. We've signed contracts with PPE vendors prior to this COVID pandemic, WRPS would go to open market on that. So thanks to Scott Agnello, we now control our own supply chain on that. And during the peak of the Omicron outbreak, the service was suffering from significant staffing shortages. We were able to mitigate that for the most part so that there were no disruptions to service, but it just shows how virulent the Omicron strain was and how much pressure that put on the service. As well as managing the internal and external response to COVID-19, the challenge was in managing the daily changes early on in the pandemic. Those were put a lot of stress on the EOC to get that information out there quickly to the members. Next slide, please. So some of the lessons that were learned were staying consistent with the command structure for the duration of the emergency pandemic. We did try and do some transitions off And I think, moving forward, we would just try and keep the same command structure to deal with it. It was difficult to predict the fluctuations in the severity of the pandemic. So, that helped. We would do a transition and then things would get worse and we would have to transition back again. And so there was difficulty forecasting where the pandemic was going to go. One area where we really learned a big lesson was ensuring that the safety officer position was adequately staffed to manage caseload effectively. As the pandemic progressed, and especially with Delta and Omicron, this position was upstaffed. But if we'd assigned some people earlier, we would have been able to manage workloads a little bit better. But these were key lessons that we've learned. As well as adding a representative from the Human Resources branch into the EOC to act as a subject matter expert or as a permanent subject matter expert. Many of the policies and procedures that were being managed and changed in the EOC involved HR to some degree, and having some HR experience would have really helped improve our workflow. Next slide. And that brings me to the end of the presentation. If you have any questions specific to Nancy, she's right beside me, so I can bring her in as well.
So Nick and Nancy, I want to thank you for this and say, Nick, my recollection of you was during the pandemic when we were looking at how we were going to deal with it, that you were often a shadow behind Jen Davis sitting there, making sure that we had all the support we needed. Our pandemic response has been built on what the SARS experience was, and it's great to hear the lessons learned, and we will build on this experience for whatever comes next. Hopefully it's not another pandemic and it's not in our lifetime. But having said that, it's a very fulsome report and incredible leadership by this team and this service to the community as we navigated these uncharted waters. So thank you so much for that. Are there any questions? Okay, I see none. I think you've left us speechless. Thank you very much for the report, and Nancy and Nick for your ongoing support to the community.
Great, thank you for having us.
Thank you.
So the next item is 11.6 December 2021 financial variance report. Chief, do you want to kick this off before Kirsten fills us in?
Yeah, thanks so much. And I just want to reemphasize on behalf of the executive leadership team, our immense pride in the emergency operation team led by Superintendent Bursey and Inspector Mancuso and others that had a hand in it. We're extremely proud and well done. Of course, the end of the first quarter would not be the same without a financial report. And so this does tie us back to December 2021, a final approach in the current variance report. So pleased to welcome our amazing Director of Finance, Ms. Kirsten Hatton. Good afternoon, Kirsten.
Good afternoon. I will take you all briefly through the 2021 results. So from an operating perspective, we did close the year under budget by $2.3 million. And as you will remember through the 2022 budget process, it was identified that 1.6 of that would go towards reducing our 2022 operating budget. So 1.6 million of that moved into our general reserve to offset our expenditures this year. So the remaining 692K was transferred to our capital reserve, which helps fund our capital projects. I will be coming back to the board with a more fulsome reserve and reserve fund balances report in the spring timeframe. From an operating budget perspective, we were basically at complement at the end of the year. However, we were under complement up until about August, so that did contribute towards savings throughout the year, which was one of the major contributors to the positive variance. Other factors that contributed towards that related to underspending on eligible retired members' sick leave payouts. Training expenses were lower, meeting expenses, as well as consultant usage. Offset by that was we were under budget by about 2.6 million. Some of the major items under there related to paid duty, of which less expense on the compensation side offset that, as well as the court security prisoner transportation grant received about 900K less than what had been budgeted. So that permanently impacted our results in 2021. And we did see some positivity around some grant funding that was not anticipated. From a capital perspective, we spent about 23 million in 2021. Some of the major items that contributed towards that included fleet, facility costs. So two major projects that were completed in 2021 was our front entrance redesign at our headquarters building to address some security items, as well as expansion of the front parking lot at headquarters. And then continuing on, sorry, to be completed this year is the central project. So that's the project to replace our central division building, which holds our regionalized cell block. Other costs we saw were the voice radio system, which is anticipated to be completed in 2022, as well as life cycle replacement of equipment, furniture, etc. So in general, we spent about 50% of our budget in 2021 and an additional 22 million, most of it being the central project was carried forward to 2022. So last piece was that in accordance with the policy collection, preservation, and control of evidence and property, we also included an annual report, which we'll be reporting going forward on evidence and property receipts. So I'll turn it back to the chief if there's any questions.
Thank you very much, Kirsten. Are there any questions from the board? I see none. So thank you, Kirsten, as always. Great report. The next agenda item is 11.7 fees and charges bylaw amendment, and there is a motion required to approve the bylaw. Virginia, I believe you're going to take this. Chief, do you want to introduce it?
Actually, Chair Edmund, I can manage this. This is really a procedural for the board. As you're aware, is that the province, under the Record Reform Act, did pass legislation that would eliminate the fee for volunteers. Currently, under the regional bylaw, there is a $20 fee for volunteers in criminal record checks and judicial matter checks for volunteers. And so this is a procedural piece. We are in compliance with the new legislation, but we do need to adjust the board bylaw. You will note that although, from a financial implication perspective, it varies and fluctuates from year to year. We do anticipate that the overall financial impact is approximately $26,000 annually. Prorated for 2022 will be $19,000. But on the other side of this, we have to recognize that community volunteerism is such an important part of our community. It's such an important part of building strong, vibrant communities and getting people connected, making a difference. And I think we all believe that even though when we give our time, which is a precious gift, we also receive so much from that volunteer experience. And so, Minister Jones did consult with police chiefs around this process of making the change. We recognize that it was coming. We've adjusted accordingly. And so this is a retroactive bylaw fees amendment to April 1st. We are in compliance, but subject to any questions, yes, there is a financial impact, but when you look at the magnitude of our overall budget, we'll continue to manage that. And with the leadership of Kate Richardson and the records management team, we are looking at new ways, innovative ways to reduce overall financial implications of conducting these checks on our service. And of course, Virginia has ensured that from a legal perspective, the updated bylaw, and we'll work with Ms. Eggleton to ensure that it's properly done. So really a procedural piece. And quite frankly, we have no choice. It's provincial legislation. So subject to any questions, I'll take it to you. But I view this as a positive for our community volunteerism, which hopefully post-pandemic continues to bring great things.
Thank you very much, Chief. Do I have a mover and a seconder? Moved by Karen, seconded by Sandy. Please indicate your support by raising your hand. Thank you very much. That is carried. Thank you for bringing that forward, Chief. 11.8 monthly Chief of Police report. Over to you, Chief.
And thanks so much, Chair Redmond and members of the board. I want to first take this opportunity and once again thank you for an excellent meeting filled with robust dialogue. I also want to thank the board for their continued support. As the community and the board is aware, last week I made a very personal decision and a professional decision that not only impacts our community and our service, but the board. And although we'll find an opportune time to speak more about that decision, I do want to take a moment to thank Chair Redmond and Vice Chair Schnarr and all the members of the Police Services Board for your tremendous support in making that personal decision to leave and to accept the position with the RCMP. It's a bittersweet moment filled with much mixed emotions, but we'll talk more about that at a later date. I want to focus on all the amazing things that's happening within our police service and our community, because that's really the most important thing, is what's happening within our service, our members, and our community. As the board is aware, yesterday, consistently the province has supported our police service through community policing grants and grants that have been around for quite some time. Over the last 4 years, they've been restructuring the grant application process. There was a new process over a 3-year period that we did apply for. Yesterday, with the support of Minister Jones and MPP Harris, Chair Redmond, Mayor McGarry, and Mayor Urbanovic, we are very pleased to receive just over $12 million from the provincial government to support community safety and policing grant applications. It was the full allocation that we had requested. The money is derived in a multitude of areas, but the majority of it will support our community engagement and well-being branch, which is very much focused on community safety, community engagement, proactive policing, as well as supporting the new approach that Staff Superintendent Goodman is leading, which is the impact team and the mental health clinicians in our communications center. And that's just over $10.3 million have been allocated to that. And equally, we also received a commitment for $1.5 million over 3 years to support our hate crime initiatives that we're doing locally, but also in supporting other 13 police services. And so that's great news for our police service. And again, this is money that has traditionally come into our police service, but it's now through a new grant application process confirmed over a 3-year process, which allows us to forecast financially. So we're quite confident we know where we are for the next 3 years, and want to credit the government for listening. And I think, we had many discussions with the board as our grant process was year to year. This allows us to actually substantiate where we're going. This is one grant. We still receive other grants, but this is a significant investment that will assist our police service in fulfilling our legislative responsibilities under the Police Act. As we look towards May, there's a couple of pieces that I want to highlight. The week of May, Saturday, May 14th, we'll be hosting our community for the first time in over 2 years, welcoming our community back for the Police Week open house. We do ask our community to support and if they can, donate a non-perishable item to the food bank of Waterloo region. But it's a great opportunity to open our doors. It's a great opportunity to welcome our community into our police service, to our headquarters, to not only connect and engage with our members, but to see the investment that they as citizens invest in our police service. And so the Children's Safety Village, equipment, headquarters will all be open. It's a community celebration. Our community collaborators, our community partners will be joining us, and we look forward to welcoming the community. On the heels of that, through Police Week, we will celebrate a number of localized events, including awards night and recognizing long service with our members. On May 1st, we'll also celebrate with all police officers in the annual remembrance ceremony, remembering fallen officers from across Ontario, and we'll be at Queen's Park with special thoughts as we recognize our own Constable David Nicholson. I'm also very proud that we have a new canine that hopefully at some point the board gets to meet. These are significant investments, but internally and externally, we hosted a naming contest. And overwhelmingly, it's an opportunity as we head into Police Week and into the remembrance that it's named Nico, which is named after Constable David Nicholson. And so it's a small nod as we celebrate this ultimate service that David paid to our community and to his family, his brother Bruce, and his wife Wendy, and of course his 3 children. I do want to, shifting forward after Police Week, we'll head into May 17th to the 22nd. We'll be celebrating Road Safety Week. We just wrapped up our first quarter of our road safety initiatives, more than 4,700 road safety charges across the region. We take a very strategic approach, ensuring high visibility in our urban centers and our rural divisions. Regrettably and tragically, on the weekend, we did have a fatal collision, our fourth of the year. At this time last year, we had 3. But as we head into springtime, it's very important that we focus on road safety. And our traffic services team and all of our divisions will be heavily involved in that. We'll once again have our special road safety team operating throughout the month of May. And of course, as we look forward, I do want to just simply pause for a second and reverse back into March. In the consent agenda item was an update on St. Patrick's Day. And due to the overall, what I believe is overwhelming success of our planning, led by our major events team and North Division, as well as in partnership with our post-secondary institutions, specifically Wilfrid University, and want to recognize the leadership of President Deb McClatchy, who's been a very strong stakeholder with us, as well as Mayor Dave Jaworski and Mr. Tim Anderson, the CAO of the City of Waterloo. We did see some significant successes. Yes, there was an unsanctioned event, but we went from over 33,000 individuals in an unsanctioned event to just around 3,500 to 4,000 individuals. And for myself, from an operational perspective, we deem that as tremendous support. So I want to recognize Deputy Hilton, Staff Superintendent Goodman, Superintendent Bursey, Inspector Lewis, and the entire team for all their work to make that happen. And finally, the work is very consistent. I think the board sees that consistently. We continue to advance the Police Services Board strategic plan on addressing violent crime and property crime. We're seeing some good outputs of that. We started the year off with some significant challenges, and they have smoothed out and sort of trended their way through. We still are dealing with challenges, but remain immensely proud of all the amazing work of our members. In closing, I do want to invite the community and invite the board this Friday, as we were celebrating Pancake Tuesday with the Child Witness Center, who we do a ton of work with through our Child Youth Advocacy Center. We had to do a virtual pancake process, and and of course, Mayor Shantz is not able to welcome us into Elmira for the annual Maple Syrup Festival. And so Chef D, a local celebrity chef, and myself, in partnership with the Child Witness Center, what a better way to celebrate the various great work of the Child Witness Center, the Child Youth Advocacy Center. And so on Friday, April 22nd, from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m., Chef D and I will be taking over Belmont Village, and we'll be serving up pancakes for our community. And we're asking for a small donation, recommended at $7, lucky 7. And all the money raised will go to the Child Witness Center. The amazing work of the Executive Director, Kim Rodriguez, and her team that make a difference in the lives of children who are victims and survivors of sexual exploitation and sexual assault. And these amazing work of Child Witness Center ensures that they have advocates through the judicial system. We have a strong partnership with our Child Youth Advocacy Center, and it's a small way that our service wants to make a difference, celebrate what would be generally the weekend where we'd be celebrating maple syrup, and of course tying that to the pancake breakfast that Child Witness Center had to do virtually. So again, in the interest of time, I'll take any questions from the board. I know that we'll have more discussion in the future around the police service, but I want to ensure that we remain focused on the amazing work that our members are doing. The call to serve our community is the important thing. I'm simply one person that leads an amazing team and facilitates the discussion and dialogue at this meeting. Behind that, there's 1,200 amazing members that make it happen every single day, 24/7, 365. So thanks so much, Chair Redmond and members of the board. Look forward to any questions you may have. And I know that Chair Redmond and I are also on a timeline because we have a community engagement that both of us, and I think Councillor Kiefer, are also at in the city of Cambridge. But over to you, Chair Redmond. And again, on behalf of Mark and Shirley and I and the entire team, thank you to the board for your amazing leadership.
So, So thank you, Chief Larkin. And although we do have a time constraint, I do want to make a couple of comments. I don't know if this is under new business or future agenda items, but on behalf of the Police Service Board and the 630,000 residents of Waterloo Region, I want to recognize your outstanding contribution to this community. Your vision and passion for local policing have been a huge asset to the community. And under this leadership, we've seen important culture change and reform locally as well as across the province and country. The leadership that has been displayed by you in the service throughout the pandemic through these uncharted waters and challenging times has been amazing. Working with all emergency responders and coordinating the enforcement efforts with our regional rapid response team in partnership with the regional municipality bylaw officers, as well as area municipalities and public health staff, actually, I think, led to a much better navigation of these restrictions that we were all living with. You provided incredible leadership through Deputy Hilton and Inspector Jen Davis and Nick Jockman, shaping an effective response to the vaccine rollout in a real changing context, which was amazing. You know, I think back to the Freedom Rally and the truckers and the fact that not only did our personnel go to support Ottawa and Windsor, but we had strategic leadership teams in the person of Tom Bursey and his staff to provide crowd control and tactical support. And you've been a vocal champion and a mentor to so many local causes. I hesitate to start naming them, but I cannot not mention Special Olympics at the top. And there's a myriad of other initiatives, some of which you've just mentioned in your report. And so many community organizations have benefited from your support and that of the service. You know, community safety, well-being, mental health and addictions, as well as human trafficking and gang activity remain core challenges for our community and local police services. Waterloo Regional Police Service continues to find new ways of engaging our community, delivering exceptional service and modernizing operations. And this includes how it responds to calls, engages in the cyber realm, and addresses hate crime motivated crimes. Today at our WRPS board, we heard of call reductions, the impact program responding to well-being checks. All of this is rooted in the collaboration. I think of the collaboration and the relationship the police service has with a coalition of Muslim women, as well as our way of tracking sexual assault reporting with our partners in the Community Sexual Assault Support Organization. Those are all cutting edge things that have happened under your watch. As we grow, it's important to continue to advance these priorities and partner across the community. The prediction is that by 2051, we are slated to grow by another 54%. And we cannot lead from behind. We have to continue to be innovative. And all of these innovations and these advancements have happened under your leadership, Chief. You lead by example, and you've encouraged leadership opportunities throughout the organization. I think of your role as president of the Canadian Chiefs of Police, and I think of the encouragement you've given to the deputies and other people throughout the organization to continue to enhance their leadership development, as well as firmly establishing our service on the map, provincially and nationally. So our community continues to be in your debt. I know there will be time for longer goodbyes and more comments, but we felt we needed to give you a shout out at this juncture. I don't know if any of the other board members wish to add their voice to this. Karen, go ahead.
Thank you, and I will be brief. I'm really here just to also note that Ian had to drop off because he was chairing a chamber web series that started at 1 o'clock, but he asked that I also echo the comments of Chair Redmond to thank the chief for his service and leadership to police and the community, and the unbelievable legacy and strong team in place to continue shared goals of modernizing policing. I would be remiss if I also didn't add, because he did say this in his note to me, that that's the last nice thing he's going to say. It's because it's going to be all a roast from this point forward. So just to anticipate, no, you would expect nothing less of Ian. But I wanted to acknowledge that because Ian asked me to bring that up. And as Chair Redmond said, we will have many opportunities to just, what Chair Redmond said was just purely the tip of the iceberg, but to acknowledge the incredible work that has been done by you and the impact on the community as a result.
Carl, go ahead.
I wasn't going to say much, but I, of course, echo all the comments that were there, and I put my hands up to clap, not to actually speak. So, but I too am very happy for the chief, as I mentioned to him in private. It's our loss and Canada's gain in where he's going. So I'll just leave it at that for now. Thanks.
Sandy.
Yeah, not to take a lot of time. Karen, you said it so eloquently. All of the different ways that Chief Larkin has touched the region, and particularly making community priority. So thank you, and I know we'll have an opportunity to do this again.
So I see no further hands. I would point out that once we're adjourned, members of the media are welcome to I think stay on the Zoom login, and Chief Larkin and I will be available for questions. And if there is nothing further for this meeting, I would entertain a motion to adjourn. Moved by Carl, seconded by Sandy. All those in favor? Thank you, colleagues. Great meeting. And again, we will stay on